Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Happiness from Within. I'm your host, Jeanette Prado. Really want to thank you from my heart to yours for taking time out of your day, your drive to listen to this podcast. This podcast does not happen without you guys, so I really appreciate all of your support. So today we have an extremely special guest. Her name is Christina Bucaran, also known as FullyRawKristina. You guys are definitely not going to want to miss this one. So you guys, Kristina has a really amazing story. At the age of 18, Kristina was continuously going in and out of hospital. She was diagnosed with a condition called hyperglycemia, and therefore she suffered with diabetes. She weighed only 87 pounds, and she almost did not graduate high school. You might be asking yourself, how did she turn all this around? Well, Kristina explains it so beautifully in our interview. She said she met her angel, a coach that she met in the supermarket out of all places, who introduced her to the raw food diet. We explore her beautiful journey from an underweight 18-year-old to a healthy young woman full of energy. She was coached into eating fruit smoothies and plenty of vegetables. She went from not eating a single fruit to eating peaches, avocados, and kale smoothies every day. It was a drastic transition, and it paid off. In a year and a half, her diabetes was completely gone. Following this beautiful transformation, Kristina learned to love herself, to respect herself, and to be fully compassionate. As her physical body was healing, so was her mind, and she was at peace with herself. Kristina not only eats raw food, she describes the beautiful raw food as a more vibrant, more colorful, and full of nutrients, the complete opposite to cooked food. She has an amazing relationship with her mother and father, and she now hosts these beautiful retreats all over the world, which include activities such as yoga, eating raw food, meditation, and meeting inspiring speakers from every corner of the world. Her journey started with a simple basket of peaches to a complete life transformation of mental, physical, and spiritual health. So go ahead and grab your favorite green smoothie, cup of coffee or tea, and I'll catch you guys in the interview. Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Happiness from Within. Today we have a really special, amazing guest, beautiful soul, Christina Bucaran, also known as FullyRawKristina. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Kristina. How are you today?
Hi, everybody. I'm Christina, and thank you so much, Janet, for having me on your show. I'm so honored. This is so awesome.
Oh, absolutely. So what I'd like to do is if you can start with your story. So you've been on a journey with your health. When you were 18 years old, you were at hyperglycemic. And can you talk about your challenges with that and where it started? Because I know you were really sick and you almost didn't graduate high school. And you went down to 87 pounds from what I remember reading. But yeah, if you can just start with your journey, just anywhere you'd like to start of how, where you were at your lowest point and how you started eating peaches.
Yeah, I'd love to. The story is long. For all intents and purposes, I'll cut it down a little bit short.
Sure.
For the interview, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, hyperglycemia, when I was 16.
Wow.
And I lived with it for about 2 years. And by the time I was 18, I had just become so run down by it. Now, just to clarify for people, hypoglycemia means you have low blood sugar. Hyperglycemia means you have very high blood sugar. And for me, this was characterized by high and low blood sugar spells, frequent migraines. Those migraines would lead me to have nausea. Sometimes it would lead me to be throwing up. And my gosh, I got underweight very quickly, not because I wasn't eating, but because I think I was just eating the wrong things. And my whole body was messed up, and it affected my sleeping. It affected my school. It affected everything. And by the time I was 18, I remember I had just gotten out of the hospital and I had an IV patch in my arm. And I was at Whole Foods digging through one of the sugar-free granola bins, as so the doctors were telling me to do. And a man came up behind me and tapped me on his shoulder, and he said, "Excuse me, are you raw foodie?" And it was John Rose. And at first I thought he was an older man hitting on me, and I was like, "Who are you?" He's like, "Well, I'm really healthy, and I eat 10 pounds of fruits and vegetables every day, and I make juice, and I do this." And he went off on me. And I was like, wow. At first I was a little scared, right? I've never heard of such a thing. And then I couldn't figure out why he was using these lines to pick me up in this way, right? It just didn't make any sense. But I heard what he was saying, and I was so intrigued by it, especially because I think he'd been raw for 18 years at the time. That it was either 8 or 13. one of those numbers. And he gave me his number, and I took it because I'm always a very open-minded person. And I went home, and I remember telling my family about him that night. And we all just thought it's crazy to do only raw food and to not eat cooked food. Like, that's just insane, right? I mean, granted, this was Texas. 13, almost 14 years ago, right? So recycling was just becoming popular. Much less vegetarianism was not a thing. Neither was veganism. Raw food was just, oh, you've gone off the deep end. So I ended up going back into the hospital that same night. And I'd never had an instance where I'd gotten out of the hospital in one day and gone back in the same evening. And when I got out like 3 days later or something, he was the first person I called. And I just remember saying, hey, look, I have tried everything I think I can, and I've never tried anything alternative before. Would you be willing to help me and to work with me? And just to teach me what you know about getting better? And he did. And he was my angel for a good 6 months period of time. He helped really walk me through this, to the point of where I would call him at 2 or 3 in the morning, freaking out that my poop was blue because I didn't know what to,
Wow.
But we became very close. We're still very close. And yeah, that was the beginning of my journey. And I'll never forget the first thing that he told me to do was to eat peaches, to mono-meal on one fruit that I wanted for a 2-week time period. And I did it. And it was amazing for me to see that people with blood sugar issues, no matter if they're high or low or whatever it may be, that fruit is actually really good for you, and that it's a different kind of sugar than what doctors were telling me to avoid. Which, by the way, at some point, every doctor that I had talked to was telling me not to eat fruit, was telling me to only eat things that came in a package and that were diabetic certified, right? Like no sugar for diabetics, for this, which basically means chemically induced foods that come in a package for people, which just makes everything worse, which is essentially what happened to me. Now, just to clarify, I never grew up eating junk food. I think I'd maybe only eaten at McDonald's like 6 times my entire life, right? That's it. And it was maybe not from choice out of my parents, but it was more so like a school trip or something that food was served. And I grew up on my mother's Lebanese food and my father's Ecuadorian food, which basically on the Latin side is chicken, beans, and rice and a lot of olive oil or fried things, right? Fried plantains.
Wow.
But on the other side, it's very heavy in the olive oil. Everything is soaked, cooked, baked in olive oil. And even there's raw meat. And I know a lot of people praise the Mediterranean diet, but I don't know that many people who are extremely healthy by it. I mean, I think when they're talking about the Mediterranean diet, they're thinking about like the more poverty-driven sectors that only can eat the fruit, because most normal people in the Middle East or in the Mediterranean, like my mom is from Lebanon, I'm Lebanese, I go back every year. Everybody's eating meat soaked in like fried in olive oil, or even raw meat that's just drizzled in olive oil. I mean, it's just olive oil and raw meat land, basically it.
Wow.
So, and that's what I attribute to me having gotten sick growing up, was a high fat, high meat diet.
Wow.
That way. And I had never really eaten very many fruits or vegetables growing up. If it wasn't tabbouleh, right? If it wasn't fattoush, it was basically not in my body. And those things are healthy, but I mean, keep in mind, greens sometimes look like appetizers to people when you're growing up. So I would say that this was my first time my whole life actually attempting something healthy and eating fruits and vegetables. And it was crazy to see how quickly my body responded to all of this. Within 3 days, I didn't have a headache. Within 3 days, it was like I was walking without fainting, which for me, it was, I always felt dizzy when I walked. I always felt dizzy when I sat up. I always felt dizzy. Wow. And I just remember, I think maybe within 2 weeks, I had put on 5 or 6 pounds, which for me was a huge deal, because ever since I'd gotten sick, my weight was just on a decline.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people think that when you go raw, it means immediately you're going to turn emaciated and get very sick. But for me, it was the opposite. My body needed those nutrients and it just soaked them up. It was like a sponge. And it's funny because after 2 weeks of eating nothing but peaches, I kept it mono-meal that whole time. What ended up happening is I started incorporating more greens and other veggies and other fruits. And I was amazed to see how, number one, how easy it was. And I did have to learn. And I had John Rose coach me along the way because I didn't eat enough calories at first, even though I was still doing well. And I really did have to learn how to do it right to be sustainable with it. And number two, people don't realize just how healing this lifestyle can be, not just physically, but on an emotional level and on a spiritual level. And it took me about a year and a half to reverse my diabetes completely. But I remember maybe 6 months after I found John Rose, I found Dr. Douglas Graham. And I jumped right into that world for a long period of time. I still pretty much eat 80-10-10. I guess most people would say that that's what it is. But yeah, it took me a year and a half to completely reverse my diabetes. It healed on its own, no medication, no nothing. And I thought that was probably the best that it could have gotten because I had never felt so physically good in my whole life.
Wow.
And I realized that the emotional component was coming in. And it was bringing about a deeper sense of healing, like childhood trauma, insecurities, all these other things. And it was like, I thought it was good right here, and then it got even better here. And then once the emotional component started kicking in and healing, it was like opened up a whole new spiritual component past that. And this lifestyle has just brought so many benefits. And now I'm kind of at the point where I'm experiencing all these spiritual benefits. And I'm like, you can't get better than this. But it may. You never know, right?
Wow. Wow, that's really beautiful, Kristina. It's interesting that transitions to the next question that I have. You're talking about emotional. Can you explain your own beautiful words, what self-love means to you and how you've incorporated that into your life?
Self-love to me it's a long definition.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
We're ready.
It's conscious self-care. So not just listening to your body, but also paying attention to the triggers that come up when they happen so that you can be honest with yourself and compassionate and gentle enough with yourself to move through them. It's being honest with yourself, and it's having boundaries with other people to protect your energy and also to create stronger relationships with others and yourself as well. And it's mutual respect, not just for your body, but for all living beings on the planet. Like for me, it just doesn't include us, it includes everything and everybody. But it's true that the way that you treat yourself, it shows in every area of your life, which means if you're treating yourself that way, eventually you'll treat other people that way, right? And the way that you show up in one area of your life is the way that you show up in all areas of your life. So you putting forth the effort to make your own life better is not just going to show up in your diet and your weight. It's going to show up in every area of your life, your relationship with your parents, your work, your spouse, your brother, your sister, your everything, right?
Absolutely.
And without having self-love, we truly can't have inner peace. We can't. And you end up operating off of a very low energy field, right? All of the time, whether it's sourced from depression or anxiety or jealousy or ego. Without having that self-love, you have absolutely no confidence. And I would say most people don't have much service to give to others. And that's where a lot of joy comes from for most of us, is being able to give as well. And without loving yourself, you can't be in that space.
Wow. That's really beautiful. I would just love to read this part in your book on page 62 for anyone that has it, about self-love. It says here, as you practice wise food choices, perform daily meditations and positive affirmations, engage in consistent exercise, get adequate periods of deep sleep, surround yourself with supportive friends, and practice acts of compassion on a daily basis, and a feeling of calm and love for yourself and others will bloom. When you find yourself caught in moments of confusion and desperation, ask yourself, what is it that I really want? At the end of the day, if you pursue what makes you happy, in the long run, you will find that deep down, you are happier right now. I love that. That's just like so beautiful. Kristina, in your posts, and in your videos and YouTube, it's just amazing what people that I've run into that talk about you, they always say it as compassion. It just comes from your heart and soul, this beautiful message. It's just who you are, so thank you for that.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. That means so much to me. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. What would you say to somebody out there, let's say they want to start taking steps today to love themselves and self-love? What is something you would recommend to that person? I guess just one simple step.
One simple step that I'd like to recommend is starting with one fully raw vegan meal a day.
Love it. How can
So
they do that? What's a simple
let's say like this is we're bare bones basic right now. We're talking
Sure.
a smoothie in the morning, right? Anybody can do that. A juice in the morning, you need a juicer, but you can find juice, right? Like a green juice. One fully raw vegan meal a day. And if you can't do breakfast, maybe you just have fruit for lunch. Let that be it. Like replace one meal each day with a raw vegan meal. Now, most people are agreeable to smoothies because they can handle those and they associate those with getting healthy and weight loss. The smoothies are actually super nutritious and they taste great too. So I would say just one fully raw vegan meal a day. You can do it.
I love that. If you don't mind me sharing, actually, one of my favorite recipes that I got from you, I love kale and mango. I'm seriously addicted to that. I have that every morning. I go to Trader Joe's and get the frozen mango, and then I get the fresh kale. But I really want to thank you for that recipe because it really has changed my life. It's just so delicious. It's like
it's simple too, right? Like
so simple.
It's so simple, but that's the thing. I was obsessed with that recipe for a good 6 months. I didn't eat anything else except for that one recipe. Where I was buying cases of mangoes and cases of kale, and that was all I was getting for a long period of time. I didn't even want to eat the mango. I just wanted to blend it with the kale because it just was a game changer. So, yes.
That's awesome. A little celery in there too gives it a little kick.
I get it.
Awesome. So the next thing I wanted to ask you is about, well, actually, I wanted to just back up for a second. You know, it's really incredible in your story how your coach, he asked you to pick a fruit. And at the time you didn't even know what fruit you wanted to start with because you weren't eating any fruit. So here, FullyRawKristina, obviously you're fully raw. So I just thought that was really interesting in your story that you didn't even know what fruit, you know, and you just started with something simple, you know, with peaches. And I was just very inspired by that because I think in life, sometimes we complicate things so much in our minds. We're like, how do we do this? How do we do that? And just keeping things simple, you know?
The only reason why I chose peaches is because they were the first thing that I saw because we were sitting at the grocery store when he asked me to do that. And I didn't know what to do. So I looked around and it was July 15th, 2005. And it was peach season. So I just looked over and I saw a table of peaches. I was like, okay, peaches. I was 87 pounds at the time, and I walked out of that store with 80 pounds of peaches. So I basically walked out of that store with my body weight in peaches.
Wow. That's really amazing. Thank you. So my next question that I have for you is, I had a few people that wanted me to ask you about emotional eating, which is something I know that we all struggle with at some time or another. But just anything you'd like to share in regards, just steps that anyone can take in regards to food, whether it's writing in a journal or there's just certain questions, just any inspiration that you have on that topic or anything you'd like to share and experience.
This is actually one of my favorite topics. I think I'm probably the perfect person to ask about it because I've helped so many through it. You know, the thing is about emotional eating is that there are many different places where it can come from. Beyond it tasting good to people, especially if we're talking about raw food versus cooked food, a lot of people eat to numb. They eat to numb. They eat to stuff. And by stuff, I mean don't just like physically stuff, but to emotionally stuff. And they're mentally unaware of it. It's like an unconscious, subconscious thing. So, right, like you've heard of self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
So the funniest thing is about this is that most people don't even realize they're doing it until it's like way past the point of them understanding where the root of it even came from. Most people eat when they're happy, when they're sad, when they're angry, when they're this, it gives them a reason to eat. It's almost like this self-reward. But if you're really clear when you have a meat in front of you, I never eat when I'm angry. I never eat when I'm sad. I sit there and I process my emotions and I cry and I feel it out. And I only eat when I'm really physically hungry, if I'm at peace and I know that I'm ready to accept the blessing of a meal. And, you know, it is interesting though, to get people out of the mindset of stuffing and numbing versus nourish and not punish. I always say that, nourish, not punish. I did a webinar about that last year. The thing is that most people are very afraid to feel anything that's going on in their life. It's a Pandora's box that they just aren't sure what will happen if they open it. Mm-hmm. It's very scary to them, right? So it's much easier to not deal with those emotions, easier to not deal with the job that you hate the husband that you don't want to be married to, your mother who nags at you all the time. It's like food becomes a safe haven for people.
Yeah.
Right? It's the only thing that's not going to bark back. But when you get into this vicious cycle of self-sabotage, right, that one meal, it may feel good to eat it at that moment, but it makes you bigger, unhealthier, less confident. It damages your soul on a deeper level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like when you feel the effects of that, but you're still dealing with all this, you still keep doing it. It becomes a vicious cycle of eating because you're unhappy and you're unhappy because you eat. And then so what ends up happening is that most people blame it on the food. Most people blame it on the overeating or the addiction or the craving, and it can turn into something far more, right?
Yeah.
And it can go beyond food. It's not just food, but food is a big problem for most people when it comes to self-sabotage. Most people don't sit and get really clear and get honest with themselves and work through the emotions and take time to cry and look in the mirror and take responsibility, 100% responsibility for all the changes that need to happen in your life. And I mean, we all have that. Shifts happen all the time for us. But I mean, this is what I love Brene Brown's work, because she talks a lot about vulnerability and having the braveness and courage to stand up and be honest with yourself at any given moment and honest with others, and that sets you free. And I truly believe so. Right? And your relationship with food gives you an opportunity to show up and be honest with yourself in all other relationships of your life as well. It's just reflected in just this one thing, but it's there. And so even when I've worked with girls who have severe eating disorders, it's interesting because their parents get very scared when they start, I don't do one-on-one coaching anymore, but when I had, would freak out and be like, she can't be on raw food. She cannot be on raw food. She's going to lose weight. She's going to get so skinny. I said, just trust me on this. She needs to have foods that love her back. So when most people stuff and numb themselves with cooked food or trash food or unhealthy food, it's not the same as eating raw food by any sense of the imagination, right?
Yeah.
Raw food has a completely different effect on the body and on the mind. And even if you hate yourself in the beginning and you're still eating all these fruits and vegetables, you're still getting in all those good nutrients. You're taking care of your physical form. And when you feel physically better, you also feel mentally better, right? So
Absolutely.
So even if I'm working with a girl who has an eating disorder, or if I'm working with a guy who's, dealing with a weight issue and a self-confidence issue or an ego issue or whatever it may be, I've found that even if you get them started with raw food, no cooked food, raw food, the food begins to love them back. And physically, when they start feeling better, it takes a mental shift for them as well. And now, granted, there gets a point where they start freaking out that all of this raw food brings up this raw emotion. They don't know what to do with it. But then we handle processing that when it comes. But yeah, I do feel like not all food is nourishing and healthy. So much food in the world, the majority of the food now in the world is toxic for us physically and emotionally and spiritually, and it keeps us from reconnecting back to ourselves. It really, really does. And I really do feel that raw food does the best job at bringing us back home and for helping this healing and cleansing process to occur.
Wow. Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. The question that I had from someone was, why not cooked foods? And I liked your analogy about the green bean. Can you talk about that?
Sure, I'd love to. So why not cook food? I'll just say this. I know so many people have called me crazy for saying this before, but I do believe that raw food, live food, is living and it has a life force to it. If you want to feel alive, why would you eat something that's dead?
Wow.
When you cook your food, you denature the protein, the color changes, all of these chemical changes take place in the food. When you eat raw food, it's colorful and vibrant and fresh and has all of the water content in it, all of the vitamins, all of the nutrients. It has everything in it that you need. And all that changes the second that you put it under fire, right? Like we've all seen it. When you take a stick or a leaf, it's bright and vibrant. And then the second you put it in a fire, it's like, oops, gone, toasted, bye, right? So the same thing happens with food, essentially, just depending on how much you cook it. And I remember this was a really difficult concept for me to grasp when I was in college, right? John Rose was trying to explain to me how much more beneficial raw food was for you. And I was like, yeah, but what if you just cooked it? And what if you were just doing vegan cooked? Why does it need to be raw? Does it really make that big of a difference? I did a little experiment when I was in college. In the cafeteria, I just sat down and I had a plate of green beans that were raw and fresh in front of me, and then another plate of cooked green beans to the left of it. I remember the quote, "You are what you eat," right?
Mm.
My sheet, and I said, okay, I'm going to write down words that describe each of these two kinds of green beans. And if you are what you eat, then the words on these paper will also emanate the kind of person I will feel like and be like if that's true. So I began to describe the fresh green beans, which was like fresh, bright, crispy, crunchy, sweet, juicy, vibrant. They just normal green beans, right? Plumpy, whatever that described those green beans. And then all of a sudden I described the ones on the other plate, and it was worm-like, sludgy, leaching water, darker green, need salt to eat them. The list went on, but I noticed that even the vibration of the words were less than the fresh ones. And when I read them in the end, I was like, oh, I don't want to be leaching water. I don't want to be sludgy. I don't want to be darker. I was like, I want to be all the words that represent the fresh green bean. And then for me, after that, it was a no-brainer. I was like, all right, I get it.
Wow.
But, and also I'll say this, I've been able to do so much in the past decade that I feel that I would not have been able to do if I weren't a raw vegan. My health wouldn't have had it. My body wouldn't have had it. And right now my body runs like a machine, like a workhorse. I do so much, and I really do feel like it's because of the food. People ask me all the time, oh my gosh, how do you have so much energy? And I'm like, it's the food. It's the food. It always has me here, there, everywhere. I get way less sleep, and I'm very good at functioning on little to no sleep. And then I'll catch up later whenever I need it. But I think for a good long period of time there, I was operating on 5 or 6 hours of sleep, and I was doing amazing at it. That just shows you how light and clean your body can get when you really dedicate yourself to this lifestyle.
Wow. That's incredible, Kristina. I'm also just very inspired if you can touch a little bit on this amazing experience with your mom where you were doing this 21-day challenge and she wanted to join. Can you talk about that?
So my mom and I didn't have a very good relationship growing up. People should just know that. We were always butting heads. I always felt like abandoned and that she didn't want me. And she always felt like she didn't know how to be a mom to me. And it was always just this struggle between us. And when I went off to college doing my raw thing, I thought that was the end between me and my mother. Wow. I mean, I remember just like fighting and leaving and just can't handle you right now. But throughout this process of going raw, I realized the emotions that were coming up for me in going raw were so heavy. It's just, you can't mask them. They're so heavy. And if you're not prepared to deal with them, most people resort back into eating cooked food. But for me, this emotion was coming up so strongly, and me learning how to love myself and take care of my body, that what I was actually feeling for my mother was unmasked pain. And then I really felt a lot of pain as a kid that she never loved me, number one. And what hit me even deeper is that I just wanted my mom to love me, and I just wanted to have a mom, and it's like I was feeling that at 18, right? Which most people like have those temper tantrums when they're 6 or 7. But think about it. I never had a relationship with my mother my whole life. So all I wanted to have was just my mom, right? And so I ended up trying to talk to her about this and saying, I know I'm 18 now and I'm growing up. And maybe I was 20 at the time. I don't remember exactly. But I just remember approaching her and trying to tell her this and saying, like, I think we should work on our relationship. That never would have happened if I had not done the raw food thing, ever. Wow. And we did do a Marshall Rosenberg course together on nonviolent communication, trying to communicate and understand where we were each from. And that changed the game for us. We'd never sat down and talked about how we were feeling and why we were feeling it and what we needed from one another. And it was a game changer. So I'll say this, we were still pretty, I would say we weren't quite on the rocks, but we still weren't getting along, right? Like, it wasn't like, oh, I love you so much, like snuggly, cuddly, lovey kind of energy between us. It was more like, you're my biological mother, and we're getting along and we're communicating and we're understanding where all these issues are coming from. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So this is my first challenge that I had done on YouTube. This was years ago. Oh my goodness, I don't even remember the date. But I just remember all these people had signed up for the challenge, and I had been doing it with my mom. Or no, I'm sorry, scratch that. I had been doing it with the people on this challenge. I'd filmed all these videos for it, and I'd put together ebooks, and all these people were signing up, and I was very excited. And I remember I was up in my room one day, and my mom walks in, and she just goes, "I'm going to do your challenge." And I was like, looked at her, I was like, "What?" And she goes, "But you're not going to say a word." She just pointed at me, and she goes, "I'm going to watch your videos and follow your ebook. I'm going to do it myself." And this was before my book ever came out, and I was like, okay. I was like, I'm not touching this one. I was let her do it on her own. Because they say that when you push, they pull. When you try and push something upon somebody, it just never happens. So yeah, 2 weeks later, it was a 21-day challenge. And 2 weeks later, my mom had lost almost 14 pounds or 12 pounds, something along the lines of that. And she was not taking her anxiety medication.
Wow.
And that was all it took for her to be like, okay, there's something to this and I'm feeling amazing. Maybe what my daughter is saying is right. And she's pretty awesome now. We have a very strong relationship, and she does really, really well at doing her daily smoothies and her salads and whatnot. Last night I ended up filming a recipe for a video, and I came home and like all of it was gone. I was like, "You didn't leave me any?" Mean. And she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you already ate yours." I was like, "Okay. All right, Mom. No problem. Happy to share." So.
Wow, that's amazing. In your videos, you talk a little bit about how your dad has always been a support for you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So my father grew up in Ecuador, more of like a poverty-driven consciousness. He grew up in a place where like there were mango trees everywhere and avocados everywhere. I mean, just fruit and veggies galore over there in Ecuador.
Wow.
And I'll never forget, it was maybe one of the first times I'd come home from college after doing this. And I remember I was in the kitchen, I was making that mango kale smoothie. Making that mango kale smoothie in my kitchen. And he walked in and goes, "Mijita, why are you making poor people food?" And I looked at him, I was like, "Poor people food? This mango was $3.99 at Whole Foods. This is not poor food." And he was like, "No, mijita, that's poor people food. That's all I ate growing up because nobody else had anything other to eat." And then I realized people wanted the meat, the dairy, the more expensive things. They were considered the rite of passage in society or something. They were considered bad things. But people who ate fruit were considered the poorest ones. And my dad grew up with that. So it's like, he never wanted to be poor, right? So for him seeing me eat that was like, "What are you doing?" But it ended up being a great opportunity for me to say, "Hey, Dad, the unhealthiest people in the world are some of the richest people in the world. It's because they're eating the meat and dairy." And he actually read the China study with me again. And once he read that, it was done. He wanted me to make him a smoothie every morning with all the mango, with everything else in it, and bananas and whatnot. And my dad was easy to win over. He was easy to win over.
Wow, that's amazing. So I just have a few more questions.
Sure.
So when you take your last breath, how do you want people to remember you?
Oh.
I know it's a deep question.
No, but I'll keep it with a simple and profound answer. I want people to remember me as bringing light and love to the world and self-healing through this lifestyle. That's how I would like people to remember me.
Wow, that's amazing. And Kristina, who has been your biggest inspiration in your life?
Birdie, she's the woman who raised me when my mom wasn't there. She's been like my second mom, and she's just my biggest inspiration. I would say her and my grandfather.
Wow, that's beautiful. My next question is, what does happiness from within mean to you?
Happiness for me is a choice every day. You can choose to be happy. You can choose to live exactly as you want. So for me, happiness means making the choice to take care of yourself and to be happy and to treat others well on a daily. That's what happiness means.
That's amazing. I wanted to ask you too, can you touch a little bit on your retreats? It's pretty amazing what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. So I just held my first retreat in Bali back in October, and it was the most magical experience of all time. For all of the 40 people who came, it was incredible. And it was so amazing that I'm going to be doing 2 to 3 more this coming year. I'm doing 1 in Costa Rica and 2, potentially 3 in Bali, and I can't wait. It's just so good. I'm ready. I'm so ready.
It's amazing. Yeah, I saw in your online that it's amazing. Like you are incorporating 3 fully raw meals a day and you guys have all these different activities. Do you want to talk a little bit about your retreat? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do feel that the reason why I first wanted to do this retreat is number one, because people were saying that there was something that I could offer that is not anywhere else in this space. And it's very true. Usually if you go to retreat, there's just one focus of it. But for my retreats, I'm bringing in experts in so many different fields. It really is a whole mind-body experience. So it's not just yoga. We're doing yoga, we're doing Pilates, we're doing intensive 3 to 4 hour long breathwork classes. We're doing 3 to 4 hour long sound healings. We're doing 3 raw vegan meals a day. We're doing food prep classes. We're doing, emotional healing classes when it comes to cravings and addiction. We have all of the elements combined, including guest speakers who talk about their expertise in this line of work, everything. And on top of that, we have some of the best chefs in the world who come and they make 3 fully raw vegan meals for us every single day of the retreat. It's 7 nights, 8 days, and it's just a heavenly experience.
Wow, that's amazing. Kristina, what would you say is your favorite quote? Your favorite quote?
If you don't take care of your body, where will you live?
Wow, that's amazing. So my last question to you, Kristina, is how would you describe yourself in 3 words to the world?
You know what? This is so funny. I was asked to do this back in college, and these people wrote these words on my dorm. Let me see if I can remember what they were. The first was passionate. The second was relentless. And the third was empathetic.
Wow, that's really beautiful.
I mean, that came from people in my dorm room back in college. And I just remember this because they were written on my dorm for like a year and a half.
Wow. Well, Kristina, is there anything else you would like to add to bring inspiration to the world?
That for every person who feels like they can't do this or they're not loved, just remember every single moment that you put towards loving yourself and changing yourself, you also change the world. You lift the whole energy of the world up, and you're not alone and you're so loved. So just think that by you helping you, you help every single person around you who touches you.
Wow, that is so beautiful. Well, Kristina, I really want to thank you for being a guest on my podcast. And I just wish you such a beautiful day.
Thank you. I appreciate it as well. Have a wonderful day.
Hey guys, well, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining me on episode 5 of Happiness from Within with FullyRawKristina. My goal with this podcast, Happiness from Within, is that you guys can take one golden nugget and apply it immediately to your life, and that may it touch your heart and soul at such a deep level. I really appreciate all of you guys. Thank you for all your support. You can actually follow FullyRawKristina on YouTube at FullyRawKristina, and she's also on Instagram at FullyRawKristina. I also really recommend for you guys to download her app. She has a really amazing app where you can get these amazing, simple recipes, and she has a shopping cart. I actually personally use it myself, and it's just so helpful. Please, any value that you guys find in this podcast, it would just mean the world to me so much if you guys can just take 30 seconds to hop over to either iTunes or Spotify and subscribe and leave a comment. Again, I really appreciate you guys. And wherever you are in the world, I just wish you the most beautiful day. And I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Take care of yourself. Bye for now.